Oh, yeah. Theaters are, of course, entirely empty. Do understand that having people buy tickets is an important part of success in your industry. Rachel Zegler, I guess, didn't get the memo.
Is Disney saying goodbye to Snow White? It looks like many countries are reportedly pulling the plug on the Snow White release. And guess who's one of them? Lebanon. The backlash this movie has gotten has now reached its peak, and it seems people have had enough. Disney's Snow White wasn't just a flop, it was a full-on box office catastrophe. And Rachel Zegler is watching the fallout from the front row in an almost empty theater. The 23-year-old actress, who's been at the center of swirling controversy ever since her woke comments about rewriting the classic tale, showed up to see her own movie this week. And the theater was practically a ghost town. There were no crowds or any excited buzz, just Zegler and a few close friends, Ilda Mason, Jorge Mason Remy, and Maria Isabel de Mason. The awkward outing was quietly captured in Ilda's Instagram stories, showing the group taking in the film with enough empty seats around them to echo every uncomfortable moment. Critics didn't hold back either. They've been roasting Zegler for everything from her attitude during press tours to her dismissal of the original Disney fairy tale. And now they're dragging her for the humiliating reality of watching her own movie bomb in real time. Even Discount Tuesday, a day when moviegoers famously pack theaters for cheap tickets, couldn't save Snow White from its dismal fate. Let's not sugarcoat this. Snow White has practically plummeted off a cliff. Thursday night previews scraped together a depressing $3.5 million. Opening weekend also only raked in a measly $43 million. And this is for a film that reportedly cost over $250 million to produce, before Disney even cracked open the wallet for marketing. To put that in perspective, The Little Mermaid opened at $95 million, and even Dumbo managed to flap its ears to $45 million on a much smaller budget. Theater reports were downright spooky. Social media exploded with snapshots of deserted auditoriums and rows of ghostly vacant seats. One user quipped it felt more like a horror flick than a fairy tale, but this wasn't just about ticket sales. From the moment the reboot was announced, Snow White was under fire, and Zegler was the spark. Her comments during press tours lit up the internet, especially when she called the epic love story weird.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Then came the now infamous Variety interview, where she proudly declared this new Snow White wasn't waiting around for a prince.
She's not going to be safe with a prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
All she cared about was leadership and empowerment. Sounds noble in theory, but for many lifelong fans, the rebrand felt more like a gut punch to their childhoods than a thoughtful evolution.
What they don't understand, what people need to understand is the great fairy tales told the way they were originally told, with all the same values, still work. We read them to our little grandchildren today.
Not to mention, people started calling Rachel out for having a major attitude problem.
Somebody tweeted and said, Rachel Zegler has such an attitude about Snow White as a character, it's genuinely off-putting.
What made it even worse was that Rachel herself wasn't bothered by her behavior at all. In fact, she's used to openly calling herself a narcissist.
I'm a narcissist. I don't know.
And Zegler's 2022 confession at Disney's D23 didn't make it any better. You'd think a classic Disney princess movie would be, well, magical, right? Not for Zegler. She came clean about how the original 1937 film straight up scared her.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious.
Not only that, but she even went on a Disney World ride once called Snow White's Scary Adventures, and that pretty much scarred her. Now, of course, Rachel's candid comments about the original Snow White didn't just turn heads, they sparked a full-blown controversy. The 1937 animated classic, which remains a towering achievement in cinematic history, suddenly found itself under fire from fans who took offense to Zegler's sharp critique. Let's face it, Snow White has been a childhood staple for generations, and its timeless animation still enchants audiences nearly a century later. So when Zegler ripped into the love story and the stalker prince, it didn't sit well with fans. And it wasn't just online trolls who were upset. The 91-year-old son of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs supervising director David Hale took it personally. In a scathing interview with The Telegraph in 2023, he didn't hold back. He slammed the remake for its whole different concept, accusing it of showing no respect for the original original work his father helped create. The backlash was fierce, and Han didn't mince words. He called the new version a disgrace, but his criticism didn't stop there. David Hale Hand blasted the entire trend of Disney's live-action remakes, which he argued had veered too far from the source material. They changed the stories, they changed the thought processes of the characters. They just aren't the original stories anymore, he said. He even went so far as to call out what he saw as a push toward new woke things in Hollywood, a sentiment that clearly wasn't sitting well with him. And just like that, Zegler's comments sparked a bitter debate, with Disney purists and modern fans clashing over what Snow White should look like in the 21st century.
Get rid of the wokeness entirely, but the problem is that Disney fundamentally isn't capable of making anything that is truly non-woke anymore.
Now, while Disney purists were reeling from her comments, the conservative media wasn't about to let her off the hook. In October 2023, The Daily Wire, known for its outspoken conservative views, announced it was working on its own Snow White adaptation. But they didn't just talk about their version, they went straight for Disney's throat. Co-founder Jeremy Boring made it clear that his version would champion the timeless values of the classic fairy tale. And he didn't hold back, taking a direct swipe at Disney, claiming their remake would expose children to the popular but destructive lies of the current moment. But before this all spiraled into a culture war that had nothing to do with the remake itself, from the moment she was cast as Snow White, she became the target of racist backlash. Critics tore into her for not fitting the traditional image of the character, something that, in hindsight, was just the start of a much bigger backlash. And then came the cherry on top, the origin story twist. Zegler revealed that in the remake, Snow White's name wouldn't come from her skin as white as snow, but from surviving a snowstorm as a baby. Safe to say, traditionalists went ballistic. Now what a lot of people didn't know is that this exact origin twist had already aired years ago on ABC's hit fantasy series Once Upon a Time, and nobody had batted an eye back then. But this wasn't about the plot. This was about Rachel Zegler, and the moment she stepped into Snow White's slippers, the criticism turned venomous. At first, it stayed online. Nasty threads, racist memes, and hateful comments. But soon, the trolls left the shadows of the internet and came clawing into Zegler's real life. In a moment that stunned even seasoned industry watchers, Zegler revealed that strangers had shown up outside her apartment, yelling slurs and profanities at her windows, all because she was a Latina actress playing a character originally imagined with skin as white as snow. By this point, one thing was crystal clear. Rachel Zegler had gone from Disney darling to public enemy number one, fast. But instead of cooling the flames, Zegler seemed to toss gasoline on the fire and light a match with a smile. You see, long before the Snow White chaos, Zegler had already proven she was no stranger to controversy. After Donald Trump's election win, she didn't just voice concern like most celebrities. No, Zegler detonated on Instagram, launching a savage takedown of the former president and his supporters. The post, which resurfaced at the worst possible moment, included the scorched earth line where she openly threw hate at right-wing supporters. Just like that, there was instant outrage everywhere. Zegler, now in deep damage control mode, issued a carefully worded apology. She claimed she'd let emotion take over, that anger only worsened the divide, and that she regretted feeding into the toxic discourse. But the damage was already done. To conservatives, it was the smoking gun, proof that Zegler wasn't just playing Snow White, she was playing politics. They labeled her another Hollywood elite who sneered at middle America. According to Variety, by the time Rachel Zegler's soundbites were making headlines more than the actual Snow White movie, Disney execs were in full-blown crisis mode. So what did Disney do? They dispatched producer Mark Platt twice to personally fly out and beg Zegler to dial it down. Not coach her, or advise her, by the way. The producer had to practically beg her to keep her personal politics out of social media.
They flew an executive, one of the producers, out to go visit personally with Rachel Zegler to say, could you please take that down? Because we understand you can have your political views, but those aren't really helpful while you're trying to build an audience for a movie. Maybe you could save them for like your diary and your friends, but like maybe not, maybe just take the tweet down. And she wouldn't. And then they had to hire a special media consultant for her to follow her around all the time and make sure she didn't continue shitting on Snow White.
But the fiery actress wasn't having it. She kept the commentary rolling, like her Instagram was a megaphone, not a minefield. So Disney did what Disney does best when things go nuclear. They put her on lockdown. In the end, Rachel was assigned an internal handler assigned to monitor, edit, and basically babysit everything she posted. The Mouse House wasn't taking chances anymore. But by then, the damage was bleeding everywhere. And just when you thought the drama had peaked, Jonah Platt, the son of Mark Platt, popped off. In a furious public rant, Jonah didn't mince words. words. He all but blamed the Snow White box office implosion directly on Zegler's shoulders, saying her public behavior sabotaged the film. It was a no-holds-barred call-out, and guess what? People backed him loudly, and just days later, things got even more surreal. March 2025 rolled around, and everyone was in for a shock. What was supposed to be the glitzy, star-studded Hollywood debut of Disney's highly anticipated Snow White remake quickly turned into one of the most talked about and most awkward events in recent Hollywood history, the red carpet. The glimmering moment where all eyes should have been on Disney's grand return to fairy tale magic was suddenly gone. It felt more like a secretive, low-key press briefing than a movie premiere. And if you take a closer look, you'll notice Rachel and Zegler weren't really seen together most of the time.
To see little girls dress up as Snow White.
It's amazing. I feel so privileged to be able to play these iconic.
Coincidence? Not quite. Disney, ever the PR machine, tried to brush it off, claiming it was always meant to be a smaller event. But come on, when a major Disney release scales back like this, you know there's something bubbling under the surface. Variety broke the news, but the whispers started long before that. Was the studio trying to avoid a public backlash? And if so, was the center of the storm none other than Rachel Zegler, Snow White herself? Paul Kleba, who plays Grumpy, was the first to speak out loud what everyone had been thinking. In a tell-all moment with the Hollywood Reporter, he dropped the bomb that the premiere's changes were directly tied to the controversy with Rachel. He went on to say what no one dared to before. Disney was scared, terrified even, of the blowback from different people in society, as if this wasn't already bad enough. Let's talk about the real behind-the-scenes drama. The relationship between Zegler and her co-star, Gal Gadot, had become a whisper-fueled mystery. Everyone had their eyes on the pair, expecting a whirlwind of camaraderie and A-list friendship. But the reality, not so fairy tale-like. Did you see just how awkward and detached these two looked standing next to each other at the Oscars? Oh, that was apparent, all right.
Visual effects push the boundaries of what we see on screen. Their work makes the impossible seem possible.
Disney wanted to paint the picture of a harmonious duo, but insiders were spilling the truth. Gal is annoyed by the movie drama. She enjoyed filming. She was fine with Rachel, but they are not friends. They have nothing in common. They did a job together, and that's it. So much for bonding over magic mirrors and poison apples. In fact, the tension between Zegler and Gadot was becoming just as much of a storyline as the movie itself. This explains why both the stars weren't even seen at most press events following the premiere. Instead, Rachel was alone at a secluded castle in Spain promoting her song in the film called Waiting on a Wish.
Yes, this is our first time working together.
As of 1 hour ago.
Yes, and we're already the two best friends that anyone could have.
We're having the best time.
What had been billed as an epic collaboration now seemed more like a case of two pros who couldn't wait for the shoot to wrap up. And it wasn't just the Hollywood Reporter who noticed. By the time the premiere rolled around, it was crystal clear. Disney was in full damage control mode.